Good afternoon, everyone, or good morning on the West Coast. I am Jeff Perry with NAMB, and welcome to this afternoon's webinar, UAD 3.6 in motion. You see lots of folks here. We have many panelists here today. We have David, Ashley, Tony, and Candy, and I'm going to turn it over to them in just a second. After this event is done, you will all receive an email with a link to the recording. So if you don't get a chance to see everything, you'll get the recording and you can watch it later. And our panelists have asked if you have questions throughout the presentation to please hold them until the very end, and they will answer your questions at that time. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to our panelists today and have a great event. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I would like to first and foremost thank NAM for this opportunity to present on UAD 3.6. This is the second part to a three-part series, and this part's labeled UAD 3.6 in motion, operating through industry change. And in our first session, we introduced UAD 3.6 as a major shift from static appraisal forms to a more dynamic, data-driven framework. We highlighted the expanded scope of data, increased standardization, and the operational and technology changes required across the industry. The key takeaway was that UAD 3.6 is a fundamental change in how appraisals are completed and delivered. It requires both mindset and process adjustments across the board. Where are we now? UAD 3.6 is now in a live environment. The industry is no longer testing. We're actively operating in the new framework on a limited basis. As of January 2026, UAD 3.6 is available to all lenders, but the industry is in a hybrid transitional phase with many lenders, AMCs, appraisers piloting UAD 3.6 on select files. So not a full adoption yet as we get closer to a mandatory November 2026 deadline. With no further ado, I would like to welcome and introduce our esteemed panel. First up, I would like to welcome David Schiffmeyer, SVP of Operations at PCV Murcor. Next up, next up, we have Ashley Beerwood, Director of Collateral Policy at Home Vision.
Hi, everybody.
And then Tony Pastelli, President of Valuations at Respi AI. Welcome, you guys. Thank you so much for coming on board. We'll just jump right on in. Guys, are we on track for a full UAD 3.6 implementation in the fall, or heading toward a last-minute scramble that will impact turn time and appraisal fees?
I'll start with that one, Candy. Thank you, and thanks again to NAM for this opportunity to speak on 3.6. I really appreciate it. Are we on track, or are we headed towards a last-minute scramble? I think the answer is a little bit of yes, right there. So we are on track, but expect a bit of an uneven rollout, more than just a smooth switch. I think we're at a point right now where people are beginning to pilot 3.6 orders. You see appraisers around the country beginning to kind of evaluate orders as they come in, and they're really trying to make a decision. Do I want this one to be my first 3.6 order? Is it going to be complicated? Is it remote? And that sort of thing. And so, but we are seeing appraisers generally accept these kinds of orders and go out there and try. It's a little bit of a uneven rollout right now because not all the software forms providers for appraisers are available at this point. Some are, some aren't, and some are in a pilot phase right now where they're allowing kind of free testing of their software. A lot of the orders are a bit handheld, I think, at this point. And that's handheld from, the appraiser working with the software forms providers, working with their AMC partners, AMC is working with the lenders and everything in between in order to kind of get these orders through the system, and have everyone's collateral underwriters become familiar with what they're seeing, and work on it. So I would say that, at least from my perspective right now, we're in a very early adoption phase, probably where we hope to be as an industry about 4 or 5 months ago. But it is here now. And I really feel like everyone's trying to accept the work right now and get these under their belt so that we can be prepared for what happens, when the November 2nd date rolls around, where it becomes mandatory to submit to the GSEs in 3.6 format. So just a couple of thoughts from my end, but Ashley, Tony, what do you guys think?
Yeah, hi everybody. I think right now we're in a place where if you're not actively ordering these and figuring out how you can process them, it's going to end up being a mad scramble. We're getting right up to the wire in terms of timing, and just keep in mind that you have to get your lender partners, your AMC partners, the appraisers, your technology partners, all in line with one another on this new process. And so if you're not working through those kinks right now, I think it will end up being something of a mad scramble. And so it's best to sort of get started as early as you can.
I would totally agree with you, David and Ashley. And for everyone, I wouldn't underestimate the effort and the scope or the reach of all the impacts that this can have. It seems at the surface like, oh, we're just getting a new appraisal form. But as you'll find out, I think in the next few minutes, there's a lot of things to consider, and better to start now than to start November 1st.
Great.
Right. And as far as fees go, I mean, because that's another part of this question, I don't know that we've seen enough roll out across the industry yet to make a positive determination around fees. I think one thing that you're seeing is that appraisers want to get these under their belt, and they kind of want to understand what they're dealing with, and they want to understand, get through their own learning curve before they figure out how long these are really going to take. So I wouldn't say now, I'd say it's really more assignment by assignment. It's really been a lot more complexity driven. And that's pretty standard for fee increases. But I don't really think that we have enough information yet to know the long term. What I can say is that appraisers think of completing appraisals as time is money. How many can I do in a certain amount of time? And so I think if these take a lot longer, we could see an increase in fees. But I also think that the way that 3.6 has been designed, it's really been designed so that when it's fully functioning the way it's supposed to function, all of the inspection tools in place, all of the data integrated, the adjustments tools all working, a lot of familiarity with how you should comment, where things go, and that sort of thing. Really, the report, I should say, it's not a form. The report is designed to create an efficient process down the road. So even I think if we do see some type of short-term friction and fee exceptions and situations like that, I do think that down the road, there's a lot of opportunities for efficiencies and speed to come out of this entire new process.
Thank you, guys. My next question is, what critical actions should lenders be taking now to avoid workflow strains, higher fees, and operational disruptions at the deadline?
I'll take that one. Again, I don't think you should underestimate the effort. Nothing better than a well thought out plan. Plan your work and work your plan, and have milestones to keep everyone on target on date wise. And you're not, even though the mandate is November 2nd, you're going to want to know ahead of time that things are all working, that your supply chain is available and trained, meaning even your downstream appraisers or AMCs, internal reviewers, underwriters. There's a lot of process that needs to be implemented as a result of this change. And David, I still call it a form. I'm going to rebel and keep on calling it a form.
Yeah, 25 years of muscle memory when it comes to what we call it. And I'll throw out there, Tony, because I do agree. This is a cross-functional effort. I mean, this is not just an AMC or an appraisal effort. It's not just an operations effort. This is cross-functional. I mean, when we have a change of this magnitude where you've got a dynamic report that's coming in with different data elements than anyone's ever seen before. Heavy reliance on mobile inspection technology, which a fair amount of appraisers have never really adopted in the past, hadn't needed to. These are the kinds of changes that are going to impact your collateral underwriting, your policy, what you can and cannot sell into the GSEs, naming conventions. What are you going to call these things? They're different. They're not 1004s and 1073s and 2055s anymore. So it's very much a cross-functional effort. And I think that's important because not all teams, maybe your legal teams or your credit policy teams, have a longer process, a longer due diligence runway in order to make changes to the policy and that sort of thing. So really, I think what lenders should be doing now is engaging all of the groups that may be impacted, whether it's panel management, QC, anything. And I think that there's some good training out there that can be accessed, but I wouldn't underestimate talking to your partners, the vendors that you do business with in the industry. We've been working on this kind of stuff for well over a year at this point. The GSE is much longer than that. And so there's an opportunity perhaps to review pricing and policies, but just exception management routines. How are you going to, if a 3.6 isn't available, how are you going to downgrade and order a 2.6 while you can? And then there's other things out there, forms, whether it's rental surveys and things like that. They're all changing. They're no longer the 1007 form. It's built into the entire UAD 3.6. And so I would say familiarizing yourself with the resources that are out there, but also talking to your partners. There are a lot of lessons learned. And so that's one of the advantages, if you are a little bit behind at this point, is that you're not going to have to make some of the same mistakes and growing pains that we've all had to go through over time. There's a lot of best practices at this point. And Ashley, I know you see workflow on a day-to-day basis. So, what do you think, lenders and others should be doing at this point?
Yeah, I think right now, test, test, test as much as you possibly can. If you can work with your, valuation providers and your technology partners to be submitting test files, probably every day at this point. We've talked a little bit about the appraisal software is not, completely ready for prime time in all instances just yet. And that can cause some strangeness when you're submitting files through the integration and these kinds of things. And so the more testing you can do with every partner throughout your supply chain is going to be better in the long run. We've found lots of little quirks that you can't even necessarily just see with your eyes when you're looking at these new reports. And so testing with your partners, giving yourself a really long runway, I think is really crucial right now at this stage in the game.
Thanks.
And one other thing, real quick, just one other thing that comes to mind is we're talking about, traditional appraisal versus 3.6 reports and that sort of thing. But there's a lot more tied to this. I mean, there's property data collection and whether or not your property is eligible for a data collection. There's going to be hybrids and possibly an expanded use of hybrids. You may have things in your credit policy, maybe from a line of business perspective that allows for alternative valuations. Maybe there's some hangups right now where you're not able to engage and use certain things. And so I think now's a really good time to be talking about all valuation products and how it can fit into that waterfall of products, making sure that you've touched on all of those different points so that you have as many levers as possible to push in the event that we do because at some point in time, it will be the fire hose. And that some point in time is probably going to be November 2nd. So the more reps, to Ashley's point, the more reps you can get under your belt with this kind of stuff and the more problems you can work through right now, there's no time like the present to be taking those kinds of actions.
Excellent point, guys. How does the shift in format and file structure with the UAD 3.6 change the way appraisal data is presented? And what does that actually look like in practice?
I can get started just a little bit on this before we hop in. No two appraisals are going to look alike at all. So this is very different from the world of the, the 1004 and the 2055, where everything was in the same place on the page. At least all of that basic information that you're used to. We know that things get hidden in the addendums, and that's one of the things that this new structure is aiming to prevent in the future. So we're really excited about that change. But in the meantime, you're going to have to get used to sort of looking through these documents in a brand new way. They grow and they shift based on the things that are true about a property or an assignment. And so it's quite different, and it's a whole new way of looking at these reports.
Candy, I wonder if I think we have a slide here where we might be able to show everyone what some of these look like. So by the way, all these examples are really taken from samples that were available on the GSE's website. And by the way, that is a fantastic resource. But as you can see, this doesn't look like your 1004 standard appraisal. I mean, there's a summary page which brings a fair amount of salient features forward, but by all means, not everything that you're going to need to see. The goal was not to pull everything to the front. That would just be redundant, but there are salient features here, whether or not there's damage in the subject property, borrower information, order details, and that sort of thing, photo of the subject property. So you can see there's a lot more information, and the layout is completely different. But Candy, if you could go to I think it's the next slide, perhaps. So the report is organized in sections. This is actually a fantastic change, but it's one that's going to take getting used to. We're all used to going to certain parts of the report because we know that's where we're going to find things. Everything's organized into sections now. And so, for example, you may have a site section or an improvement section. And in that, you're going to see some things that are real changes. In the improvements, you're going to see exterior condition and exterior quality and that sort of thing. You'll see, zoning and more information on zoning. I love that because, you're going to get information in here on, whether or not the property can be rebuilt. And as you go through the various sections, if they're relevant, for example, if you get into a section or with a property that has an ADU, an accessory dwelling unit, that section is going to expand and there's going to be a new series of questions. But what that means is nothing's ever really in the same place. But because it's organized into sections, photos of the subject property are going to be organized from an exterior perspective into that section, from a site perspective, from a street perspective. And so as you go through the report, no more hunting back and forth between, page 19 to get some photos of the subject property and then 23 for the sketch. And then trying to make sure that the sketch matches the photos, matches the photo labels, matches the grid, and cross-referencing all of that. And then if you see damage, perhaps, or what appears to be damage, no more hunting through a 75-page addendum. That's a bit of an exaggeration, but no longer hunting through a massive addendum. All of the information is going to be there. Doesn't mean that there's not going to be commentary. There's going to be commentary. It's just going to be relevant to that specific section and included in that specific area. So we are going to have to get used to the dynamic nature of this form, but it's organized in such a way so that there's not as much of an Easter egg hunt as there has been in the past. And Tony, I don't know what your thoughts are on the new layout.
I would say exactly what you just said at the end, David, that change in the format is going to be the biggest change. And it's, you hear terms like structured data, sounds intimidating, but really it's just as you explained in your kitchen section, you're going to have pictures of the kitchen. And it's going to relieve your index finger from, or control F or whatever you use to get through and navigate a PDF. It's all going to be there. It's going to be a very thoughtful, continuous process. And I think after time, maybe it's analogous to getting a new cell phone. You struggle for a day or two and pretty soon you forget how you used to do the old one. And I think the new form, while it's larger in number of pages, it's laid out better. It's going to be easier to follow. And at the end of the day, it's going to be a much more seamless and efficient review process and easier for the appraisers to complete it. Fewer mistakes, fewer needles in the haystack, meaning, I have that on addendum page number 3, buried in the report in the small print. It's going to be all very visible as you go through the report. So I think we all want it.
Yeah, sorry, Tony. I was just gonna say, and Candy, I think if you could zoom in on like that third slide or one of these, that's a fine slide. Zoom in on any one of these, and you'll see how it just looks so different. This is the grid. Now the grid's not going away. We still have a sales comparison approach. It's still key, but it's organized into sections. Doesn't really all fit on the same page like it used to. And and for a lot of these reasons, that's why I think it's really important. The tools that you're using to go through this report, I think it's really helpful when you have tools that can isolate certain characteristics and generate maybe potential red flags, things that you just need to investigate a little bit closer, so that your tools can help you as you navigate. This form was designed to be able to be reviewed with much more sophisticated review tools than in the past. But because of that, I think it could be tricky from a manual review perspective, at least at first, to go through the entire report. So, I think that there's a lot of great partners out there, whether it's for components of the review or it's, companies that you're integrated with or even AMCs that you might work with and that sort of thing. Um, so I would just say that it's a unique format and it's far more iterative and it's going to change. And because of that, I think it's really helpful to have tools that you can use to help you analyze all of the different components.
I think one thing too that it would be really great for both lenders and AMCs to be doing now is communicating with your appraiser partners, right? They are so used to putting everything into commentary and addendums, right? We've been asking them to do that for so many years now because there just wasn't a good place in the grid. And so I feel like it's going to be a bit of a learning curve for everyone involved to make sure that this gets reported in that new data structure in a way that we can leverage that over time. And, I think that it's just going to be a learning curve. We're going to need to have patience with one another throughout all this. And, those of us who are working with our lender partners are here to help as we all get used to this new format and how we want to see these things reported on.
And that brings to mind one other thing. When we talk about cross-functional teams, credit policy, and all different kinds of things, there's stuff in this report that never existed in the past, or maybe it existed, but it wasn't required to come forward. And I'll just give you some examples. There's an entire section on green homes. There's some new requirements. How high or how high are some of the ceiling heights, and how high is the door from the grade of the land. GLA as a concept has gone away. It's above grade and below grade finished area. And so there are a lot of things that are new and that may not have been addressed in all of your policies, procedures, and routines. And it's helpful to know what you might do, what you're going to require. Another thing that I think is interesting is this report is not designed so that every single section has to be filled out. There will be sections where they can be left blank. Not that the idea isn't addressed, but maybe some of the follow-up questions don't necessarily need to be addressed. So the goal is, you have to understand what's going to be required and what's not going to be required, and what is the appraiser supposed to include and not, and what are they not supposed to, or what's not required for them to include. One of the things I love, there's a section down here on the right-hand side, and Candy, if you could zoom in on that bottom right. This is a section called additional properties analyzed and not used. So for example, if the appraiser didn't want to use the next door neighbor for some reason, maybe it was a distressed sale, maybe it was a below market value for some reason or another, had damage, had a stigma, things that aren't really easy for us to determine, the appraiser can say, I saw this sale and I didn't use it. That can really help get in front of perhaps a reconsideration of value or a revision request. And so, but how are you going to use sections like this as they come forward in the report? I think those are the kinds of questions you want to be asking.
Great, thanks, guys. And my next question is, with UAD 3.6 set to impact the whole entire ecosystem. How should lenders begin thinking about appraisal coverage, software alignment, and market shifts? And what comes next?
I think the next first thing that everyone should do is order one, try it out, and experience it. Maybe on something that doesn't have to close right away, that you can designate someone to work with your different stakeholders along the way, your AMC, your appraiser, your underwriters, reviewers, and walk them through, take notes, make an action plan if you need to, ask some questions along the way, some excellent questions, operational questions in the chat. And these are the kind of things that you're going to see once you do them. It's all going to be speculation and hearsay and secondhand stuff unless you actually try it. And to me, that would be the first thing. Do it. We're outside of I need the appraisal in 3 days so we can close, or they'll be homeless. Make sure that you have some time to work through and give everyone time. We're hearing from appraisers the first one takes longer, and we've heard estimates 7-8 hours. Once they're familiar with the software, they can get through it even quicker than they were before, with a lot of the efficiencies built into some of the web-based softwares. So it's all about familiarity.
Anybody
And
else?
I would also just add that there are other partners out there that are ahead in some of these things. If you're not, you may not have readiness. You may manage a panel, but maybe the panel ends up with gaps or holes. Some people may choose not to adopt. And that sort of thing. We're not sure. We've heard estimates on that. I really don't want to speculate too much on that because sometimes you hear a little doom and gloom, and sometimes you hear really positive and encouraging information. But I would say that your ability to kind of engage and integrate with a partner, whether it's a company like Tony's that's helping to analyze all of the photos for damage and other things quickly and efficiently, or a company like Ashley's with Home Vision that's able to help organize the QC into one, into that kind of potential red flag type of a format, or it's a company like PCV Murcor who's working with appraisers at scale and lenders at scale who are nationwide, who are looking to, who are adopting and starting to figure that thing out. It's not a bad time to really think about, even if it's as a second line of defense, how can we leverage other partners in the industry in order to make our process more efficient and to shore up any gaps that we might have, even if it's only for a transition period, or maybe it ends up becoming so efficient that that's the way you want to go into the future.
Yeah, and I just want to throw in here that, one of the things that I think is really important, obviously I live in the appraisal review world for the most part, so that's where my focus is. But many of the sort of review or underwriting checklists that folks have been relying on for so long, on the sort of back half of the process, are going to fall down in this new world of this extensible format. And so I think it's going to be really important to, whether you leverage technology platforms like Recipe, Home Vision, these kinds of things, to really sit down, get your hands on some of these files, like Tony said, and read through them. What kind of questions do you have? What kind of things do you need your underwriters to be checking, right? Really get your arms around how you want folks to look at these things. There are folks like us out there that can help if you're getting stuck. But definitely sit down and just really get your arms around a few of these and see where you have questions, where are you bumping into things that don't quite make sense to you, where are places that your partners can help you, that you wanted to give some instruction to your appraisers. I think just sitting down, really spending some time with this so that you can come to your partners with thoughtful questions and concerns and considerations is really going to be important in the next month or two.
Then, Tony, do you have any insights?
Not anything that David and Ashley haven't already said. Again, don't delay. Start today.
Yeah, those that if you prepare early, there is going to be less disruption into your processes. I mean, and you don't want to be, and you know what? Not everybody's going to be prepared early. Some people are going to be getting ready at the last minute, and that could be bottlenecks for appraisers and all kinds of things. Wouldn't it be good to know that in some of your key markets, you've already identified a few individuals who you trust and who are great partners and that work with you, and that they're able to do that work? If you manage a panel, have conversations with those appraisers, send out some readiness information, pick up the phone and talk to them about it. And I think that will really help go along with this is still a people business. And so I think just talking to people is going to get you really far ahead. Take the training that's out there and look at the review documents. All that stuff is important. But I really believe that if you partner with others, you're going to be able to accelerate your learning curve in a huge way. This is pretty cool. I love this. This is some of the stuff that Recipe AI does. Some of the things, I think we've got another slide maybe on what Home Vision does. But as you can see, they are going through all of the exhibits in the report, all of the data fields, and organizing that kind of thing. And as we, as an AMC, use these tools, we're going through and addressing those issues up front on the front end so that we can deliver something much cleaner to you, testing against the UAD compliance rules, making sure that those fails are done so that you can really focus in on those core collateral underwriting elements that are important to your business rather than getting caught up in a lot of the weeds. That slide on the right shows it's an older property, and fair amount of damage. And look how convenient that is when you can pull this sort of information forward.
Thank you so much, guys. So we've compiled, some questions that lenders should be asking. So these are just kind of points that we've kind of brainstormed. Asking questions to your partners. Is there an integration guide that they should be receiving or working towards your LOS or OMS? And then asking the questions, when are you going to be ready to set a 3.6 order? Your service providers. And then asking yourself, am I going to be utilizing, both the legacy form or the 3.6 forms? Are we planning to retire the legacy forms? Will there be changes in the pricing structure? Are there any workflow changes, workflow processes that are changing that I need to be aware of? And then is there a list of naming conventions or a list of new products that should be delivered under 3.6? So these are a few of some really good questions to be asking yourself to try to get ready for that November 2026 deadline.
And can I throw one thing out there, lesson learned real quick? Whatever you decide to name your new product, it's probably not a bad idea that you have 3.6 in the naming convention so that people actually realize what they're getting into, what they're accepting. It's easy to see on the back end, whether it's 3.6, single family, condo, whatever, however you want to do it. But that is sort of it's called the URAR because it's one dynamic uniform residential appraisal report that can handle all different kinds of property types, even things that are ineligible for sale to the GSEs. You can put 6 units on this report, but when it comes to the naming convention, it seems really basic, but if it's not easy to flag and identify in your process, then it's going to create confusion, and there's going to be some mistakes made.
That's a great point, David. And guys, we also created a UAD 3.6 transition lender focus checklist for you. So there's a QR code on the screen. Once you scan the QR code, it's going to lead you to a checklist of things that you should be looking at when we're transitioning to 3.6. So this is a great tool for you guys to use. So I will leave this QR code on the screen, and then I'm going to go to the audience to see if there's any questions that we're going to ask our panel. So let me go ahead and dive right on into the chats to see the questions that we have. This is a good question. What should we be telling realtors in regards to this?
Well, I'll start. Or go ahead, Ashley. Do you have a thought?
Yeah, my only thought was, I think that real estate agents are probably getting the least amount of education on this new form, as compared to anyone that we've talked about today so far. So it's probably not a bad idea, if you have agencies or partners that you work with, to just share this information, the GSE information. This is where we're headed. This is what the new forms are going to look like. As much as you have those relationships, share these things. Um, I think that, as best you can, informing the real estate agents that you're working with, that it may take a little bit longer, the first couple of these, that long term it's good, but give them a little bit of a heads up that, there may be a revision request or two that delays this thing by a few days, in the beginning. Better to put that expectation out there up front rather than have someone be surprised, I think.
And one thing that's true is that appraising is not changing. So all of the fundamental things that appraisers have been doing all along are not changing. But what is changing is how they're going to be performing their inspections and how they're going to be reporting out the data elements. So there's going to be some differences in that regard, but this is not a fundamental change to appraising. One thing that I would say that you can always tell realtors is this, and I know it's been a long time now, but appraisers and realtors need to be communicating. It is so important that they communicate on every assignment. So it's always a good opportunity to reinforce that appraisers and realtors should be talking to each other. They're not restricted from an appraisal independence perspective from talking to each other. Best practices are for realtors or for appraisers to reach out to realtors when they have questions or concerns. If realtors have good insight and information into the property, make that available to the appraiser in a compliant way, not where you're trying to steer the value and that sort of thing, but appraisers are required to consider all relevant information on the property. And so I would say anytime you're having that conversation, this should be a collaborative effort, and appraisers are good resources for realtors and vice versa.
Thank
I
you,
think as
guys.
far as real estate agents are concerned, they might be one of the lesser impacted people in the process. However, it would be important to note, I think you're going to see appraisers coming in with technology, whether it's an iPad or a phone, doing a floor plan scan, maybe data collection from the phone. It's going to be different. It's probably going to take longer at the site, where an appraiser today might be in there for 20, 30 minutes. It might be more like a home inspection where they're in there for an hour. They may even be able to finish the appraisal or get a great deal of context to the house right on site rather than doing their research later. So impacted time for a listing agent or a homeowner might grow. And when they see the appraisal, if you share a copy, it's going to be way different. Instead of 2 pages or 10 pages, however many, there's like 20 or 24 or 25 pages of, stuff, because everything is more section by section. So wouldn't be a bad thing for brokers, loan officers, lenders to have informative opportunities for brokers, get them closer to you, educate them on the new form, opportunities to build new relationships.
Great. Thanks, guys. Our next question is, do you have any insight on when HUD will transition to the new appraisal type?
I have a little bit of information on this, and you can't hold me to this or HUD to this. Remember, HUD is a government organization, and it's not easy for them to make changes. I just got back from a conference the other day. I do believe that their plan is to fully adopt. I think they're diligently working towards the November 2nd deadline. We'll see if they make it. It's not easy for the government to make changes, and this is a huge change. But I do know that they are working towards adoption, and they are working towards that deadline. And it brings up another, what are you going to do when a loan flips from conventional to FHA or vice versa? How are you going to deal with that? And what's going to be allowed and not allowed? And are you going to end up with essentially a new assignment? Maybe not a full fee assignment, but maybe a little bit more than a conversion that you might have today in your processes. But I don't know if you happen to partner with some of those folks, obviously stay in touch with them. But I do know that throughout this entire process, they've been collaborating with the GSEs, and these reports do contemplate all of those, HUD and VA type requirements. So that it's not going to need to be a wholesale change when they move forward. I have heard that the VA into the future will likely continue to accept 2.6 and 3.6 for maybe into the foreseeable future. But I do know that they are looking to adopt, and that the report's already designed to handle a lot of their nuanced requirements.
Thanks, David. Well, guys, that is the last question that we have from our audience.
I had
I would like,
really,
go
really
ahead.
quick. I did see one comment in the chat that I actually wanted to respond to. It was less of a question, but I actually think it's really pertinent, where someone is saying that every lender is going to have their own rules on appraising and that the LOs are going to be sending lots of revisions. That happens today in the current world of the 1004 and the 1025. And one of the things that I'm actually really excited about with these new forms is that a lot of this information that lenders have been asking for appraisers to put in the addendums in the form of commentary, in the form of all of these different ways of phrasing things, much of that is now being standardized into the body of this report. So I'm not delusional. I know that this is going to take some time, and I know that there is going to be a process by which folks sort of wrap their arms around and come together around how they want things reported in this new form. But I do believe that this new report actually makes way for more standardization and less variation between lenders. So I think it will be a matter of being patient with one another here, but I do see some improvement on the horizon for us in that way.
To that point, Ashley, some of these sections that expand when you get to them, for example, ADU and things like that, the GSEs are putting a lot of their requirements forward so that those are now questions that must be addressed and answered. So the chance of just being able to miss and not comment on things around solar panels or new construction properties or accessory dwelling units, outbuildings, so on and so forth, all of these kinds of things, they're now they're now built into the report itself into individual sections, and also the grid handles those things in a much easier way so that it's not on individual lines hidden at the bottom, separated out, and that kind of thing. So my initial concern when I first saw this report was, oh my gosh, this is going to be a revision nightmare situation. The more I've learned about it, so I completely appreciate the initial reaction on that. And maybe I am being a little delusional here, and I do think that there's going to be some rough patches, and I do think that it's going to be a transition period and all of that. But I do think that by having so many enumerated fields, so many drop downs, everything in the section, not having to cross-reference, not looking for things buried in the addendum, having to explain things in greater detail to actually hit on the specifics that the GSEs are looking for, my hope is that those things will reduce, and so that what we end up with is less procedural type defects. And maybe we can focus a little bit more on the collateral underwriting, the supported opinion of value, and those material things that really create a fair amount of repurchase risk. Also, my hope is that we could get rid of some of those technical things that, if they're not appropriately addressed, could create an eligibility situation, which can be a repurchase, even when other things are done correctly. So my hope is that it's thoughtful enough to really address some of those things that actually are either creating a lot of minutia back and forth or eligibility type risk.
Great points, guys. Well, that was the last comment question that we had in our chat from our audience. So with that, we're going to close out this webinar. Thank you guys so much for joining us on this two-part series, the second part of our series, three-part series of 3.6. I would like to thank our esteemed panelists, David, Tony, Ashley. Thank you so much for all your insights and, guiding the industry through this change.
Thanks, Candy.
Thank you, Candy. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks so much, everybody.
You all have a great day. Bye-bye.
Thank you.